Hello and good evening, and thank you again for joining us for our Men's Health Summit. This is the June is our celebration of men's health, and so we decided to put together our inaugural Men's Health Summit here on BlackDoctor.org. And so we've had a full day that is still going of panels all about men's health. So earlier this morning, we had two panels. We had one on multiple myeloma, and we learned all about multiple myeloma from a patient perspective, from a caregiver perspective, from a doctor's perspective. That was a wonderful panel. Then the second panel we talked about clinical trials and the importance of clinical trials improving health outcomes. And so, yes, was it academic? Yes, it was, but it was very important because we understand that for Black people, if we want to improve our health outcomes, we've got to get involved in those clinical trials. Then we just finished a panel. If you didn't watch that one, you missed a treat. We had a panel on sexual health. And so it was really riveting. And we talked about men and our sexual health and what that is, not only from a physical standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint. And so please go back and watch any of those panels. And now we're talking about that gut, right? And so as a man of a certain age, I'm not going to tell you my age, but as a man of a certain age, uh, when I was younger, it was flat. It was washboard. It was special. It was something that I prided myself on. And then as I got older, I went from fit to fluffy. Let's just say that. Let's just call it that way. And but the challenge is as it starts to get larger over time and is not as tight, that excess belly fat can have implications on our health. And so while we know that I may not get back to that full washboard, six pack that I had when I was in my 20s, we do have to make sure that what I'm doing is healthy for me and it doesn't get to a point where it is impacting my overall health. And so that's what this panel is about. We're about losing that gut, getting back to a healthy way of living and having that excess belly fat go down. And so we've got a wonderful panel of experts that I'd like to introduce you to you now here with us today. So some of these faces you have seen before. So we've got Dr. Monique, aka the physician in the kitchen. She does a show on Thursdays called Veganish, where we talk about eating a more plant-based diet, and she gives you some wonderful tips and recipes on how to do that. And she just recently published her book, Doc Fix My Plate, and it is a book on healthy vegan recipes. So you can't say that you don't know how to cook vegan because you can get Doc Fix My Plate and you can get the recipes right there. We also have Dr. Yolanda Lewis Ragland. She's now a BET award-winning doc. I did. Dr. Gigi had to tell me you were so humble. You didn't even tell me that you got the award for on BET, the BET Awards, and so she is also a host here on Black Doctor. Always called Mind, Body, and Stress that she has on Fridays. And we just talk, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful contributor. She is a double board certified pediatrician and bariatrician, and that is somebody that deals with obesity. So she's got all the answers that you need in terms of trying to lower that belly fat. Of course, we've got Dr. Gigi, who I affectionately refer to as Auntie Gigi. And she has just been a wonderful, wonderful partner here at BDO. She is the executive director of the Rodham Institute. Uh, what is your specialty? You're internal medicine, right? Dr.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Internal
Yes.
internal medicine specialist. She's the doctor to the stars and to all the celebrities around the world. Dr. Gigi, I'm telling you, she's special. And then we got Dr. Griggs. I'm so excited to have Dr. Griggs here again. Dr. Griggs has been with us recently, just been part, but now we're going to make him part of the BDO family. Dr. Griggs has a wonderful, he is part of 100 Black Men. He has really just been a dynamic professional. And so while we're just excited, he got introduced to him recently, and I just asked him to be part of the sexual health program. But I was like, hey, if you got the time, because you got a little time, come join us on this program. And so we had him here. And then Dr. Toomer. Dr. Toomer, I didn't get any of your information, so I don't know how to I just meeting you here. So kind of let people know what your specialty is and introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay. I'm a family medicine and community health physician and founder and CEO of Health, Wellness, and Weight Loss Centers as a way of reducing the shame to change that we often see in the weight loss realm. And so that's where my focus is.
Well, you are perfect for this conversation. So we are so glad to have you here. Um, so I just a couple of housekeeping things I want to say. So if you are watching this program, drop in the comments that where you're watching us from. We always like to know where people are watching us from. So drop that in the comments. Number two, if you have any questions, please drop those in the comment section. We will get those asked and answered through the time that we have allotted for us this evening, because we want to answer your questions that we have for you tonight. And then finally, if you know somebody that needs this information, please tag or share this on your page, because we want to get this information out to as many people as possible. So, first question, we'll throw it to you, Dr. Toomer. What are some of the implications for health implications for having excess belly fat?
Well, one of the first is that if you have fat, belly fat, often you also have fat around your organs. And so that inhibits their function. That's heart, intestines, kidneys. And then one of the others is that when you have excess fat anywhere, adipose tissue, it gets it can convert testosterone to estrogen. So the male hormone gets converted, and it also makes it harder for men then to then function as men. And so you have all the side effects of that. And anytime you have excess belly fat, you have to think about stress and why it's there and how that it got there. And so there's lots of different implications for stress, and there's lots of reasons why that can be there. But there's generally, just in general, looking at anything that deals with health, you have to look at what I call a biopsychosocial approach to all of it. So it's not just the health, you have to think of the psychological as well as the social impact of all of it. And so anytime that you are in a situation that is not optimal in health, it can also have a psychological impact. It can also have a social impact because of that psychological impact. And so all of those things sort of play together. So there's really, it's hard to name just one thing, but there's several and they all interplay with one another. And I'm sure the other panelists could also attest to that.
You know, Dr. Yolanda, we talk about stress and the mental aspects all the time. Um, Help kind of expand on that a little bit and how that impacts our overall health when it comes to just not being fully, having so much stress in our lives, whether it's from work or whether it's relationships or home, whatever, how that stress impacts our overall physical health.
I mean, everyone on this panel is probably an expert at this, not just about what we've learned, with chemistry and physiology, but just our own personal lives. So it's coming out of this pandemic, we can all attest to this. But the reason we do the show, as you know, Alice, mind, body, and stress, it's because there are physiological changes that we undergo, somatic, actual physical changes that happen from stress. And I think that we underrate stress so much in our lives, especially as people of color. So we were talking about work and, our families and our children, but there's also the micro and macro aggressions of just living, in our community and working in our community and fighting for, how about just some of the healthcare needs, reproductive health, all the stuff that's happening, right? That's just, we're constantly fighting. And so these stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline and these things that we're constantly pumping out, that fight or flight, when we're in this perpetual state of fight or flight, which many of us find ourselves in, whether we want to be or not, then it has effects on our adipose tissue, has effects on our blood pressure, has effects on the ways that we absorb or don't absorb nutrients. And so you find out. And so, I do this whole thing where I talk about ways, and when we get to solutions, I will talk more about how when you reduce stress, you reduce the cortisol levels, you reduce your blood pressure, you can actually increase or improve the way that you digest foods, as well as you can interrupt the cycle of this impulse eating, things like that. But all of these things are affected by something as simple as stress. And so as much as we learn, and we need to learn about how to eat and what to eat and when to eat, if we're not also dealing with the stress in our lives, then sometimes you feel like you're doing all of those things and you're not seeing any results. And that's why.
Right. So Dr. Gigi, I learned, as I'm the layman on this panel, there are two types of fat in our midsection, right? There's two layers. So there's a layer that's on top of the muscle, and there's fat behind the muscle. Can you help our audience understand the difference in those two types of fat that are in our midsection?
Sure, of course. I think Dr. Toomer actually mentioned this. There's the fat that we can, I'm doing it to myself right now. I'm pinching it around my belly. And then there's the fat that we can't see, which is actually super dangerous, right? The visceral fat. And as she mentioned already, as Dr. Toomer mentioned already, it's in our liver, it's in the kidneys, heart, all the vital organs. And why is that important? I mean, yes, we don't like to look a certain way with the tire around our bellies, right? Or maybe patting us elsewhere. But the visceral fat is much more of a health concern because, as she's already mentioned, it doesn't allow the organs to do their work. But also, fat causes inflammation. Yes. Inflammation is not good. Inflammation, it kind of, there's a vicious cycle that happens. The more fat you have, the more fat you'll get. The more inflammation, things like cancer rates will go up, right? So it's once you're on that path, it's actually tough to break. Not impossible. We've got people here who have a lot of experience in the field of weight management, but I also want to talk about something else, because there are certain conditions that actually put us at very, very high risk for chronic diseases, and that is sleep apnea. I think, and what that plays into is what Dr. Yolanda has mentioned about stress. So for chunky people such as myself, we have sleep apnea, and untreated sleep apnea. That's when people snore, or maybe you notice that if you have a bed partner, they may stop breathing or they wake up. The symptoms are a morning headache, a very, very dry mouth, sandpaper mouth, having to get up several times in the middle of the night to urinate, and then not feeling refreshed by sleep, right? So sleep apnea, which causes inflammation, your body is constantly in a state of stress because you're not getting that oxygen to the vital tissues. Sleep apnea actually makes it more difficult to lose weight. It's one of the challenges. If you're not losing weight, stress, absolutely, but another kind of body stress that we experience is actually from sleep apnea. And we now know that sleep apnea can increase dementia. It can affect sexual functioning in men. It can increase depression, diabetes, and cancer. So usually when I mention sleep apnea to my patients and I talk about the dementia or the sexual functioning, people all of a sudden pay attention to. I think sometimes other diseases don't get people's attention, but it's all related, right? It's all one system.
It's funny. I started smiling when you mentioned sleep apnea, because that's exactly what Dr. Griggs was talking about on our sexual functioning show.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So it's kind of teed up exactly for you, Dr. Griggs. So you want to add some more to your, the impact that sleep apnea has on our overall health?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. If it's a men's health summit, if you want to get a man's attention, you start talking about, Ellis, I'm going to say it again, you start talking about that soldier in the morning. When I give my community speeches, the first thing I have every man do, I said, understand, I got hands, don't rush me stage, don't rush at me, but I want every man to stand up, put their shoulders back, and Ellis, you can do it there, and look straight down. If you cannot see the tips of your toes, you are not being all the man you can be. Intra-abdominal fat and obesity are a major contributor to all kinds of chronic diseases that can ultimately, as Dr. Gigi said, lead to affecting your sexual health. If your soldier is not saluting and standing at attention and you can't see your soldier, you probably need to lose weight. And there are a number of things that can contribute to it. It can be stressful. and it can lead to stress eating. The sleep apnea is something that really needs to come up because a lot of us as African-American men, especially, we played sports in college. And if you played football, you were encouraged to have a large neck. If your neck circumference is larger than 17, sleep apnea, it means that you're not breathing. Obstructive sleep apnea is when we're standing up in a vertical position and we lay back and all the tissue falls down on our windpipe or our trachea, and it causes us to stop breathing. Now, just because you snore doesn't mean you have sleep apnea, but if it's something that you should get checked. It's something as simple as asking the doctor to check the circumference of your neck and going to get a sleep study. You talk about sexual health, you talk about men not performing, they'll lose weight, they'll do all kinds of things. If, do it for the cause, right? Do it for the cause. But yeah, everything that is, I mean, we're all preaching in the same church about weight. Stress eating turns into a self-perpetuating cycle that leads to obesity and leads to inflammation. The thing that I love here, though, and that, I mean, it's a pleasure meeting all of you, is that we're giving real solutions. I don't know how many times I've been in a barbershop and a man says, well, the doctor said I just need to change my lifestyle. And what does that mean? There's no follow-up. There's no book, Doc, fix my plate. There's none of that. They're asking me what to eat, and I recommend that they go to a nutritionist or a dietitian, and they don't even know what that is or the resource to start. So having these conversations is crucial, and we're right on path to talk about everything as long as we keep talking about that soldier. Every guy is going to
So, as a man that has a soldier, I definitely appreciate your
yes, sir.
I definitely appreciate your analogy there. So, Dr. Monique, what are some of those foods that can help us lower that belly fat, keep that soldier working, all of those things that men pay attention to? What are those things? I know there was a phenomenon a couple years ago called the dad bod, right? So like that dad bod was supposedly the most attractive thing, but it's like sometimes we can get too far along down that continuum where we're like, oh, it's just, aging. We just kind of look past it and we just buy bigger shirts. We wear shirts on the outside instead of tucking it in. There's ways. It's a drip. It's not a flooding. We just we tend to cover it up. It's like something like you start losing your hair, you comb it over, you do what you need to. You try to hide it, but with that, we do different things. We try to hold it in. Now I see there's man spanks going around. So there's all these different ways that we're trying to do to hold that stomach in. And really there's better ways to do that, like eating healthier, eating a more plant-based diet. So what are some of those foods that we can eat to help flush out some of those fatty things that are in there?
Well, I too would like to say thank you for being a part of this very auspicious panel. And I so agree with what Dr. Greg said about when you're talking to men. I'm a family practitioner, and so I used to counsel men, and I used to use car analogies because you talk to guys in language they understand, and one of the analogies I used to use years before I wrote this book was, you think about a car. If someone gave you the keys to a Porsche 911 or whatever, Carrera, whatever the high-end sports car, you're not going to pull up to the gas station and put 87 octane in there, right? You're going to put high quality fuel in that car. Why? Because you want that car to perform, go vroom, vroom, and go from 0 to 100, right? In 6 seconds flat, or whatever the sales pitch is. So your body should be why are we treating our bodies less than when it's really the greatest example of engineering and on the planet. So but before I kind of get into what you should eat, I also want to just give a shout out or draw attention to what we drink, those liquid calories. I think it's easy for people to kind of know what they should and shouldn't be eating, right? Like fried foods and processed foods and cookies and candy. But a lot of times those liquid calories don't get factored in. And what I tell patients is pretty much anything other than water has some kind of calorie associated with it. And we call it a beer belly for a reason. Why? Beer alcohol has 7 calories per gram associated with it. And on the spectrum, when we look at proteins and carbs, they have 4 calories. When you look at fat, it has 9. So alcohol has almost the same amount of calorie count that fat does. So if you're drinking a lot of beer, if you're drinking more than, for men, if you're drinking more than three drinks a week, you have to think about those calories. Not to mention coffee, right? If you're stopping at Starbucks every day, I'm too cheap. I'm not gonna spend $5 a day on coffee. That's $5 a day, and that adds up. But if it's in your income budget and you want to spend it, but think about your calorie budget, right? Because if you're just getting this plain black coffee, that's fine. Black coffee has great antioxidant and other health benefits. But by the time you add in the cream and the sugar and the caramel and all this other stuff, guess what? You're drinking those calories. So I just want to bring that to people's attention, because sometimes that gets left off the plate. No pun intended. But as far as what you should be eating, we talk about this every week on the show, is really the closer the item is as it came from the ground, the better. So your less processed, your whole wheat, your whole grains, your fibers are definitely the food you want to use. We talk about that visceral fat, the fat that encases those organs and that drive inflammation. We know that plant-based diets that are high in antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, have the effect of preventing and reversing disease, right? And so one of the best shows I've done on my personal live stream was the one where I talk about, sexual health. What kind of foods, if you want to have a good date night, what should you be eating, right? Because what we're talking about is basically natural Viagra, natural ways of increasing nitrous oxide, which is chemical the body makes that reduces the blood vessels, right? Makes those blood vessels dilate and increases blood flow to those soldiers, right? So the foods that tend to do that are going to be like your berries, your leafy green vegetables, asparagus, dark chocolate, all these different things, walnuts. All of these have the good fats, or they're high in antioxidants, and they are going to help with blood flow. And one thing I just want to say too, since we're talking about sleep apnea, and the other thing too is relation or correlation with heart disease. And so if you do have sleep apnea, or if you're a man who's suffering from erectile dysfunction, please don't just chalk it up to, I'm getting older, that's just what happens. Because oftentimes, if the blood flow to your soldier is not adequate, that can be a precursor or a harbinger of impaired blood flow to the larger arteries that feed your kidneys and your heart and your brain. So your doctor, when you're going in, don't just go in and ask for the little blue pill. You really should be being evaluated, because that's your body's way of telling, hey, something's going on. I've got too much. I need, there's too much buildup in those arteries, too much plaque. So, but yeah, those are some tips on things you can start to do to add into your diet to start to improve. Watermelon is another natural aphrodisiac, and of course oysters. Everyone knows oysters.
Beyonce song.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Beyonce said watermelon.
Yeah, that watermelon. I hear watermelon.
Love watermelon.
That's so black folks don't get embarrassed. Eat your watermelon. Don't let people talk to you.
It's summertime.
Yes.
Enjoy your watermelon. It's good. It's hydrating. It's full of those antioxidants. Eat your watermelon.
It's great for the troops.
Can I just say one thing also, because I think we're focusing on, in this case, men who have a gut. There are some very interesting studies that have been done looking at people who have normal weight but have an awful diet versus those that are chunky. And we would assume that the chunky ones would have more visceral fat. And that's not necessarily true. The slim ones, or at least they look outwardly slim, if they're eating a diet that's full of those, mocha, latte, whatever, and, eating a lot of high processed foods, fast foods, they may have just as much visceral fat on the inside and maybe not carry that gut. And this is important for younger men to know. So it's not just the ones that have that. Sometimes they don't have it, but they have a lot of visceral fat. So for example, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, it looks like you have a fatty liver, that's a tip-off of having visceral fat.
Yeah, that liver is supposed to be lean and mean. So if you've got fatty liver, that's a problem. So Dr. Toomer, I know you mentioned that you run some weight loss centers. Do you find that it's harder to get men to come in, especially Black men, to come in to those centers, or not? And if they're coming in, what are they complaining of if they do come in to the weight loss center?
Yes, it is more difficult. And if you look just generally at the weight loss industry, it tends to be geared very much towards women.
Mm,
And so a lot of men feel alienated from that. A lot of the messages we send out are really geared towards women. We talk about
mhm.
menopause, we talk about other things, but we don't talk about male hormones as much. And so, yes, it is. Um, However, one of the things I do find, and I think a lot of us can attest to this, is that when men decide they're going to lose weight or they're going to get healthy, they have results a whole lot faster.
Okay.
And often it's because of their testosterone and their muscle mass is why they're able to do that. And so it can be very frustrating for spouses when they come in together. They're doing the exact same thing, and the husband tends to, or the man tends to lose weight a lot quicker. Um, One of the things that I often get now, I mean, most people now in my community and through my social media know that I reversed my own diabetes by losing 100 pounds. And so often now I attract those people who are trying to reverse and prevent their diabetes. And
Wow.
so and that and so men generally are complaining of, my doctor told me I'm pre-diabetic, and
Right.
that's often a driving force. Now, that's the first visit. Usually by the second visit, then I'll get the erectile dysfunction discussion coming
Right.
in. And because I do test for testosterone levels. And so then they ask why, and then that opens up the conversation. But mostly it's to prevent disease. And so therefore it tends to be generally older, a little bit older. Usually younger men are concerned about their weight. They're concerned about more or less the social impact it has.
Right.
And so, which is one of the reasons that I tend to screen a lot for mental health issues, a lot of
Mm,
times depression. When in my
Mhm.
own weight loss, I found that it was depression that was keeping me from losing weight. So once my depression was treated and I removed that stigma, everything else fell into place. And so it's really important. So often with younger men, it's psychological impact, and with older men, it has to do with disease prevention, is what I find. But getting the message out to men
right.
that there is a way, that it does work, and there's a lot that we can do, that this isn't all about women, especially since in the weight loss realm, like I mentioned before, we tend to use shame as a way
Mhm.
of getting people to
Mhm.
change.
Right.
And we, unfortunately, that shame gets perpetuated by creating these unrealistic expectations, these unrealistic measures that no one can maintain. So we fail at that. We feel more guilty. We feel like it's our fault, like we
Mm,
failed something, and or we're being directed towards measures that have nothing to do with the cause of why we
mm.
gained weight in the first place. And so, and that unfortunately affects men and keeps them away.
Wow. Wow. That's profound. So, Dr. Yolanda, Dr. Toomer mentioned pre-diabetic. Help our audience understand what that means and the impact that could have on somebody's health.
Right. So a lot of times we're looking at, how your body processes sugar. We have the pancreas itself, and we have these enzymes, and it helps us process sugar. And then you get your numbers, and we're always talking about know your numbers, know your numbers. And so when someone gets their glucose checked, specifically, not your sort of daily glucose, but something that we call your hemoglobin A1C. That's a number that sort of gives us an idea of how your sugar sort of runs in your system, maybe over, say, a 3-month span, because it gives us a better idea of like your long-term processing of the sugars. And a lot of again, it's the refined sugars and the foods that are really high glycemic indices that cause you to have these high glucose in your system, and we don't process those well. And in the presence of a lot of sugar, we have to pump out a lot of insulin. And in the presence of a lot of insulin, we actually form fatty acids. So a lot of people think it's fat that makes us fat. It's not. It's sugar that makes us fat. It's fat that gives us cholesterol issues, that clogs our arteries, that give us a heart attack. So anyway, so we're concerned about how you're processing that sugar and how your insulin is responding to that. And so when we say know your numbers, generally anything above, say, a 5.8. So we'll say pre-diabetic. It's around 5.7, and everyone sort of has their own, I tend to look at not just your numbers, but maybe also if I see other signs, like we have something called acanthosis nigricans, which is like a darkening of the skin that tells us if you're becoming insulin resistant. And so sometimes your numbers don't look so bad. They might be a little bit lower than that 5.7 or 8. But I already know that you're becoming insulin resistant. But again, that 5.7 to around 5.96, 6.1, I mean, the absolute number is 6.2 and above. But again, because there are these other factors that we look at, everyone sort of, and as a pediatrician, I jump in early. So I'm a 5.7, 5.8. I'm already calling it pre-diabetic because if you're a teen, and you already have acanthosis nigricans, and we're talking about your weight, and we're looking at that number going up too close to the diabetes level, then I'm a little bit more aggressive. But I think with adults, it tends to be maybe a little bit, they might be a little bit more generous unless you have those other symptoms. But any of that, in any concern, or the issue is how you're processing the sugars, how much sugar you're actually consuming, and the fact that your body is overwhelmed. The organ that processes that is becoming overwhelmed, and so when that happens, you get all of the complications of diabetes with your eyesight and the sugar forming in your vessels, which causes microocclusions, and then you don't have the circulation, which is where you get diabetic foot, all of these things that are happening. So it's all about these the occlusions in these vessels that will then lead you to not get the blood flow you need to certain organs, and that includes your eyes and your kidneys.
The soldiers.
The soldier. That's right. Every time I see Dr. That's all I'm ever going to think about when I see Dr. So, the soldier, but all of the vessels, right? And of course, we obviously understand some vessels are more important in men than others. And so, but all of that matters. And that's why we talk about diabetes and pre-diabetes, because it's an early indicator and we can reverse it, as Dr. Toomer shows you. That's the best thing about diabetes type 2 is that it is reversible. And so all doctors are excited about having this conversation early because we can help you reverse that.
Absolutely. So let's kind of move, because we talked about there's a myriad of problems. We could have a whole conversation on just the problems, but I want to have this conversation move to solutions. So Dr. Griggs, Dr. Toomer alluded to it about how the messaging about weight loss is kind of geared more towards women. The messaging is about shame, and men rarely go in there. So how do we get more men to go in or to lose weight in general, even if it's on their own, or you have that conversation with a doctor or go to a weight loss center and really kind of lean into this whole, hey, I've got to lose weight for my own health and not because I want my soldier to, I mean, that's a side, that's a part of it, but you need to be healthy just to be healthy, not specifically for your soldier. That's a kind of a part of the equation, but not the total equation. So how do we get more men involved in thinking in terms of, I can't have this excess belly fat, and some of the behaviors that I'm engaging in, like I'll speak to my vices. I love hot wings and French fries, and I know both of those things are not good.
Comes with a beer. That's the problem.
And the beer, as Dr. Monique, thank you for calling me out of that. Comes with the beer that goes with it, because hot wings and fries, you can't drink a water or soda. You got to have the beer with it. So those kind of behaviors are detrimental, or can be detrimental, if I'm not doing other things to offset those vices. So how do we get men to get a more plant-based diet and do those activities that'll help alleviate some of that visceral fat in their bodies.
Well, so one of the first things that we can do is exactly what we're doing now and have more open and candid conversations about it. I use the soldier analogy because it does just that, whether it be a group of men, women, mixed company, they all smile and you have their attention. So you say it's not the most important organ, but it is to men. And what happens there happens all over the body. So the way we keep it clean is that we think now, if you want to think in terms of soldiers, what would you want your soldiers to eat? What would you want your soldiers to do to be in their best shape? Would you want them to drink a bunch of beer, liquor, and hot wings to go fight? Or would you want them to eat a plant-based diet and drink water to go fight? Do you want them oversleeping the alarm to get up in the morning when it's time for reveille and to raise the flag? Or do you want them to be sleeping through it, and do you want them to be groggy? Do you want your soldiers well rested? Do you want to make sure that your soldiers are getting between 7 to 9 hours of sleep? Do you want your soldiers waking up in the middle of the night, all night, every night because you have sleep apnea? No, you need to get it checked out. So you think in terms of, you start making that man start thinking as his soldier. You're fighting for your right to fight. You want to be as healthy as you possibly can. You don't want to have, if you start thinking about a steal, thinking about in lay terms, thinking about the visceral fat and the fat stealing blood and supplies from your soldier, because it definitely looks smaller. If you look down and you can't see the tips of your toes, it looks smaller. It looks smaller. If you start thinking about the conversion of testosterone to estrogen, those things hitting it where it hurt, and you get every man's attention. I still tell guys when I give the talk, I'm like, look, don't ask me for no blue pill. Ask me for a bottle of water and ask me what time I'm going to walk in the morning. That's Viagra is your food, those vegetables, those nitric oxide rich foods that she's talking about, and exercise. Do you want your soldiers have to take blue pills to fight, or do you want them to naturally be ready at all times like Floyd Mayweather?
I like that.
Agreed.
I'm just borrowing some of these analogies.
Very well said.
That's why I invited him. I'm telling you, it's
Yeah.
but
you know what, Ellis? I think what's also helpful. I mean, Dr. Toomer shared her own journey. You've talked about, I've talked about my sleep apnea. I think it's also about the relationship that you have with your clinicians.
Yeah.
There are studies that show that when women who are overweight go to see even an eye doctor, they get lectured about their weight. I'm going to just give you one example of what happened with one of the residents. There was a patient that came in and she lectured her for half an hour about her weight. And then I looked at the reason she came in, stroke. I'm like, so I walk in and it's this African-American woman sitting like this because she'd just been lectured about her weight for half an hour. So I think in the medical healthcare system, we traumatize people a lot. There are people that don't even come to the doctor's office because of fear of getting up on that scale. Less so men, okay, but actually, because of the shaming, I think men too. Women, we express it more, we talk about it more, but men too. And, when we're talking about solutions, I just want to mention one thing. There are some medications that make us gain weight. It's important to have that conversation with your treating clinician to see if there's an alternative that does not put on the pounds in the same way. There are some medicines that we know will help lose weight. I'll, obviously defer to my colleagues that are experts and do this, on a more of a daily basis to talk about the medications. But those are other ways that, we can mitigate things. And then finally, I'll say exercise, just walking, even if you don't lose a single pound, that helps reduce the inflammation. That helps reduce the insulin resistance.
Real quick, Ellis. One of the we want the blood flowing.
I was thinking, and increase the blood flow. We're talking about the soldiers, so a lot of that is very important with exercise. So,
But one of the things that Dr. Gigi is bringing up, and when I talk to people, it's about grace. We need to forgive. You need to allow. We are so hard on ourselves and so hard on each other. And as a clinician, that's the last thing that you're supposed to be. So waking up, I tell people every morning, get up when they brush their teeth, look themselves in the eye and give themselves grace. It's okay. You're here. Smile. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. Right. Give ourselves, we're so hard on each other. We're so hard on ourselves. All it does is it increases our stress, causes us to stress eat. I started a habit in residency of eating in my sleep, waking up with a whole plate of wings and chips. And during COVID, started it again. And I had to forgive myself for not even having all them crumbs in the bed. But the point is giving yourself grace and being willing. The last place you should be avoiding is your healthcare provider. That's a place, it's a safe space. So create a safe space with yourself and realize it's going to take one day at a time to get to your goal, and know that your healthcare provider should be your ally in the journey for you and your troops. And if not, then find another sergeant. You can always find another clinician.
I'd like to add to that one of the things that I tell my patients is that our body can't tell the difference when we're being bullied by someone else or by ourselves. So you have to be very careful with what we say to ourselves because we'll react the same.
And we're better. We're better at bullying ourselves.
Yeah,
than others.
exactly.
To be quite honest, we know exactly the punches to, the low blows. You know what I mean? We don't pull punches. And so I think we're so much more cruel to ourselves sometimes than others, or we'll even preempt someone else, right? If someone starts to sort of say something, or you feel like they might be thinking a certain thing, and so they're going right at it. And I've had people that are just so self-deprecating sometimes. I'm like, stop doing that. Like, no, it is okay to have not done the best today. Every day is a new day. That's the other thing, right? So, and guess what? I don't even think of it just as a day at a time. Just like my clinic schedule, I have my morning clinic and my afternoon clinic. If I mess up in the morning, I still have the afternoon to fix it. So sometimes people think the day is already ruined. I had, such and such today. I've ruined, and I'm like, no, it isn't. You can still, drink water for the rest of the day. You can go get a walk in this afternoon. But we're so mean and cruel to ourselves. I think you're so right, Dr. Toomer, that, we just have to really be kind to ourselves and be ready to just have let's just do something different this afternoon. Let's do something different tomorrow. And just understand what that grace looks like.
If I may jump in, I mean, I totally echo everything that was said. And because one of my first book was about mindset, was about meal planning. And everything starts with your mindset. Anything you want to be successful at, anything you want to achieve, you need to start with the mindset, and not, the stinking thinking is what some people call it, when you're telling yourself why you can't do something versus why you can. And, one of the first shows we did, Ellis, I made an acronym out of the word diet, because to me, diet is a 4-letter word, because it's the fad diets, your small lowercase d diet. That's what you eat most of the time, right? But these capital D diets that are just meant to help you lose weight to go to your reunion or get into that wedding dress, the yo-yoing, we know that's not good for you. So to me, diet should stand for daily intentions of eating triumphantly. And I think that goes to what Dr. Yolanda was saying, in that, okay, so, you fell down today, but you get up, tomorrow, and but you kind of, take some time to analyze, well, why did you fall down? What happened? Were you stressed? Why did you eat that? Were you stressed? Were you sad? Were you angry? Were you bored? Because food, isn't just about being hungry for a lot of people. It's filling other needs that until those are addressed, they're going to be stuck in this cycle. And so one of the things I talk about in my new book is, people think that being vegan or plant-based is for other people, or it's too hard, or it's too expensive. And so when you put those blinders and those obstacles on yourself, you're losing before you even get out the gate. And so you don't have to go out and empty out. I'm not telling people to go in your kitchen and empty out the freezer, fridge, and cabinets and pantry. No, but as you go grocery shopping or writing your grocery list, be mindful of, well, what can I do this week to increase some plant-based? Can I use some lentils this week versus something processed? Or can I add more beans or more fiber naturally? And just make small changes, because those will add up. And then being open to experimenting with different ways to prepare your food, baking those or air frying, even if it's just, if you still want to do your chicken wings, but you start air frying them versus frying them, little things. And then that you'll gradually move the needle and see that reduction. And when we were talking about the waist fat, I did want to mention the number. We talked about knowing your numbers. The waist circumference is one of the measurements that doctors are taking, that your doctor might take, and that's 35 inches for women and 40 for men. So, if you're over those numbers, that can be a concern and be considered as well.
Dr. Toomer, there was a mention of some medications that could help you lose weight. Could you help our audience understand what some of those medications are, and then what the implications are of potentially taking those medications?
Well, one of the things we found that a lot of medications for diabetes have caused weight loss.
Okay.
Some of that is because a lot of people are walking around with insulin resistance and with metabolic issues, and so therefore those medications work. But also, what they do, they're called GLP-1s, and what they do is or the antagonists. What they do is they increase the body's ability to metabolize the one thing that makes us gain weight more than anything else. And that, what we talked about earlier, were carbohydrates, creating an insulin arc. Cortisol levels also make insulin less sensitive, makes our bodies less sensitive to insulin. It also makes our bodies hold on to glucose higher. It raises our blood sugar. And so what this medication does is it acts on that connection as well. And so I'm probably not explaining this as well as I could, but essentially what they do is they reduce appetite. They make our bodies better able to use the mechanisms that are in place to metabolize our carbohydrates, and therefore we don't make as much fat. It also does the opposite in that when we need fuel, it will take that fat and help it break down in order to use it as fuel. And that combination, what it does is it creates weight loss. Those are the most effective. They're also cardiac protective. Some of them are also renal protective or kidney protective, and they're safe to use for long term. There are shorter term medications that are used also, but usually those are to suppress appetite. They're not as safe, and they can't be used for very long. They're not supposed to be used for more than 12 weeks. And if most of us who have been overweight know, we're not big eaters. So suppressing someone's appetite really doesn't reduce weight very much, because you get to a point where it doesn't take much food to keep your fat on your body.
Wow.
And so things like Adipex, the phentermine, as people might know it as a generic name, it works temporarily, but like most people who've ever used it know, it drops your weight, but then it ends up coming back plus some. And so generally, the medications that work best are the ones that address the underlying cause. The other medications that work that we found are some antidepressants, especially people who tend to eat because of their moods. And one of those is bupropion or Wellbutrin. And what that does is it affects it works to treat depression, which was actually the medication that I used initially, not realizing at the time, 20 plus years ago, that it was actually part of a weight loss regimen. And so just treating the underlying cause of depression, anxiety, ADHD is another that affects people's food and their relationship to food, can also be helpful. And so again, underlying causes are the best treatments. Medications that go right at not eating are not the best to use.
Right.
And I want to say, to make sure that we mentioned that, and I think most of us have, are hormones, right? Yes. Recognizing that hormones and hormone levels are really a part of why some people are noticing, as Ellis started off eloquently saying, as he gets older and he's getting, he's gone from fit to fluffy. That's something that we all sort of say. And it's because our hormone levels, the most active levels for men being testosterone, for women being estrogen, those hormone levels are dropping. And so with men, oftentimes will have this almost immediate effect of building muscle and losing fat when they can find out that it's their testosterone that needs to be sort of just maybe bolstered a little. And again, as Dr. Chris was saying, when you're gaining fat, you're also converting your testosterone over into estrogen. So you need to sort of reverse that by losing weight. But I just love
that was big for me. That was big for me. That was big.
Yeah. And but acronyms, I think,
are
great. Yeah. I think we need to make sure. I love the diet acronym. Discipline is one of the ones I use. The 10, just talking about solutions real quick. Discipline often is a bad word, but I find it to be a very helpful word. And the book that I wrote on nutrition, Discipline, is like, it was basically, it started off with detoxing, like, taking out the bad stuff out of your, diets, impounding imposters, meaning all of the like, processed foods and things like that, setting yourself for success with like meal planning, consistency, all of that stuff, increasing, the I was increase your water intake. P, we haven't talked a lot about portion control, but it is there. Like if we're going to talk about foods, we got to make sure we're also getting people to understand that you can't just eat all of what you want to eat. Eat better. But understanding when you feel like satisfied, we don't need to eat till we're full, So just having those conversations. But go ahead, Dr. Gigi.
Thank you. I was going to just add that some of our audience members, when they heard that low testosterone may be related to weight gain, is like, well, why don't I just take testosterone? That'll, But the reality is that testosterone, when used right, just like with any medication, it can be very helpful, but just taking testosterone, remember, it increases things like prostate cancer. Right. So you really want to work with a clinician that can be sensitive to all of your healthcare needs. And of course, the way that has already been described of losing weight through the changes in diet and exercise, I think are the most effective. Testosterone maybe, but I wouldn't go to that as sort of the first thing out of the gate. And I'll also share with you one of my experiences. I was married in the past, and I was married to a large man. And what happened is that I used to use much smaller plates. But then he started, the plates got huge. And I picked up a lot of weight because you eat what's on your plate. So right. Something as simple as just changing to smaller plates can help, because we eat what's on our plate, especially those of us of a certain age whose parents told us you got to finish everything on your plate. You don't want to waste food, etc. So some of those things, which are in a way just optical illusions, or filling your plate with more color. Color is your friend. The more color that you can eat. But just as a practical thing, because I don't know, for somebody like me, I don't do well with having to be on, strict rules. I try to incorporate those fruits and vegetables into my day, or the walking into my day, so that it's not an all or nothing.
If I could just add too, with the portion control, when you go out to eat, or if you're ordering takeout, particularly at a restaurant, ask the waiter or waitress to bring your to-go container when they bring your plate, as opposed to eating until you're full. Because if you go ahead and take off half of the plate, because a lot of restaurants, you may have enough food for 2 meals. Go ahead and take that off, or 3. Go ahead and take off half of it before you even eat, and you may find that you are less likely to overeat. And drinking the 8 ounces of water before you even go will help you feel as well.
Another strategy is ordering off the appetizer menu instead of the meal menu.
That's some great strategies. This conversation could go for 2 hours. I promise you. This is definitely one. First of all, this is a fantastic panel of experts that could really help us get into this topic and the subject matter. And second, it's just so interesting. It's really just crystallizing some things. And as much as I thought I do from working with all of you individually, still learning things like the conversion of testosterone to estrogen, and just understanding that there's a complex system at work here, including the mental side. And I think our relationship mentally with food, because I felt Dr. Griggs, I was like, being at home during the pandemic, I put on my COVID-19 quick, right? Just eating because I couldn't go anywhere and just had food. And so you sit around the house, hey, okay. And it was eating more when you're stressed, that stress eating, all of these things that can happen, those triggers that we don't recognize as triggers are impacting our health because we're eating unhealthily. So I might eat those wings and fries and beer as a comfort more so than just as a flavor thing or on occasion. But I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling good, so I'm going to go and make myself feel worse by eating a lot of fat and carbs and all this other fried foods, and that's not healthy. And so we've got to rethink, our mindset. I think thank you for that, Dr. Monique. Rethink our mindset and understand what our triggers are, and then start working in those habits, working in those leafy greens, filling that plate up with those vegetables so there's not a lot of room for those meats and other things that are not as healthy for us. Fill that plate up with vegetables first. Eat a salad first when you go to the restaurant. I like your suggestion, Dr. Toomer. Get the salad, order the salad, and then you only have enough room left for an appetizer, and the salad is going to be good as long as you don't smother it down with ranch dressing. Black folks, y'all know about y'all ranch dressing.
Croutons and ranch dressing.
I might not be in your neighborhood. I might not be on your block, but I'm in your neighborhood when I talk about y'all folks with some ranch dressing. Y'all love the ranch dressing, black folks. We know we love it, and it's terrible for us. So just understand, I just want to thank you all. I really could go on, but I got another panel. What our last panel for the night is coming up next year, and we're going to be talking about pancreatic cancer. And so we've got a great panel with our friends at Cedars-Sinai talking about pancreatic cancer up next. So that's our last panel for our Men's Health Summit. But this has been fantastic. Please share this with your friends. Like, share, comment. Share this with your friends. Tag a friend. Understanding that health is wealth. Food is medicine. You have to fix all of it. It is connected. Our sexual health, our mental health, and our physical health. It's all connected, and we have to make sure that each one of those are treated with the right level of responsibility so we can be healthy, wealthy, and wise. And make sure, men, make sure that soldier is saluting whenever it's ready. It's time to go to panel. And I'm going to leave on that. So thank you all again for joining us, and we will see y'all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye-bye.